Final Fantasy VIII spends a lot of time lying to you. The dramatic battle in the opening cutscene turns out to be nothing but a classroom exercise between two schoolboys. The main antagonist you've been fighting for the last few hours? Oh, she's not the real villain. It's been this woman you've never met the entire time. The White Seed ship is located off the coast of Centra. Except it's not. The White Seed ship exists in its own dimension because it's a sentient evil force that thrives off human misery and decides where and when it wants to be found, entirely depending on how much of your day it can ruin. But the biggest lie that Final Fantasy VIII tells the player is also its most obvious. In fact, it's been right in front of our faces this entire time. And it's this: Garden is a failure. And look, I know what you're going to say. Garden was set up to defeat Ultimecia, and Squall defeated Ultimecia. So how can Garden be a failure if it achieved what it was set up to do? But does Squall defeat Ultimecia because of Garden? You see, I'd argue his time as a student is what nearly costs him and his fellow classmates their lives. Throughout the game, we see Sid Kramer attempting to mold Squall into the ideal hero, in order to prepare him for his fated role in the time loop, promoting him to Seed, forcing him into the position of commander, and then abandoning ship to leave him and the other Seeds to fight off a military invasion on their own. But Squall ends up defeating Ultimecia by defying both Sid and Garden. He abandons Garden, Seed, and the mission to defeat the sorceress so that he can bring Rinoa to Esthar. It's only because he acts in his own personal interest, not as a Seed or as a commander, that Squall gets access to the spaceship Ragnarok, which is able to break through the barrier around the lunatic Pandora. Going to Esthar, and later space, also reawakens Rinoa, whose new sorceress powers are the only reason Squall is able to enter time compression and find Ultimecia's castle. Not to mention meeting Laguna and Dr. Odin, who come up with the only plan to defeat Ultimecia that ends up being effective. The more Sid attempts to shape Squall into this hero of time, the further away Squall gets from this goal. Sid's forceful manipulations do more harm than good. If anything, Sid and Garden often end up hindering the mission more than they help it. Separating Squall from his sister without explanation leaves him with deep, unresolved trauma that isolates him emotionally, making it nearly impossible for him to connect with others. Forcing him into positions of power and life or death battles with no warning triggers a panic attack, shattering his confidence and his ability to lead. Under Sid's mentorship, Squall becomes a miserable, anxious, isolated young man with no desire or confidence to do much of anything. He's only a Seed because he has no other opportunities in life. It's only through the power of love from Rinoa, love from his friends, and eventually love for himself, that Squall is able to recover and achieve anything of use to the mission. In fact, no matter how hard Squall tries to escape his destiny, he always ends up accidentally fulfilling it, which suggests that whether or not Seed or Garden exists, Squall still would have defeated Ultimecia, simply because he was destined to do so. Garden also ends up almost jeopardizing their own mission through their treatment of their other students, like Cypher. From the very beginning of the game, Cypher exhibits a number of concerning behaviors that foreshadow his later alliance with the sorceress. His arrogance, jealousy, rage, and need for total control are largely ignored, hand-waved away as the actions of a problem student. This lack of attention and acknowledgement, especially from a major parental figure, leaves him completely open to manipulation by Sorceress Edea, who convinces him to join her and fight at her side. And while Cypher is often referred to as a puppet or a lapdog of Ultimecia's, I think it's worth acknowledging that Cypher is powerful enough to cut an ancient god in half. That's a pretty formidable and totally avoidable roadblock to killing the sorceress. Which brings me to another point. Are the Seeds good at what they do? They might be good fighters in combat, sure, but can they fend for themselves in the outside world? I'd argue no. In fact, I'd argue that seeds wind up being an argument against the need for garden, and a cautionary tale against the concepts of child soldiers in general. Because for all the grief they give Renoa and the forest owls, the seeds often fail as much as they succeed, largely due to their youth and inexperience. Despite being highly trained mercenaries, the seeds are still just teenagers, and I think that shines through in their behaviour. Cypher allows his childhood dream of being a knight to dictate his decisions. His blind arrogance nearly compromises the entire delay mission. Quistis is appointed as the youngest instructor in garden history, but her youth and inexperience cause the other students to undermine her leadership. Her emotions often cloud her judgment, like when she abandons her post during the Delling City mission. Zell, in a moment of anger, blows the team's cover on live TV, jeopardizing the safety of his peers back in Balam. Irvine's inexperience, uncertainty, and his childhood connection to Adia, his former foster mother, causes him to choke during the Delling City mission. When the seeds are forced to operate on their own without adult supervision, it results in as much failure as it does in success, underlying the idea that training children and sending them into military action is not only a bad idea for the effectiveness of the mission, but also for the well-being of the children involved. Nobody benefits from child soldiers. Lies are the backbone of Sid Kramer's empire. The seeds are not told they're training to kill a sorceress until after their graduation ceremony. None of the students in Balam Garden know that the GFs they're required to use cause memory loss. The garden staff even tell them not to listen to outside voices because GF's controversial side effects are well known by everyone except Balam Garden students. And Squall is never told about the supposed destiny that he's working towards until the very last minute. Garden is on the side of good, according to Sid, but in reality, most graduates go on to work in the war industry. Considering the only army we meet in the game is the one in Galbadia and the one hidden in Esthar, and especially since Galbadia Garden runs a recruiting program with the Galbadian military, it's pretty obvious that more often than not, many of these former students end up as a tool of the Empire, and very rarely its saviors. When the good characters, the representatives of the game's narrative, are also the ones constantly lying, hiding, and manipulating the truth, it kind of makes you wonder, if even Garden was a lie, what else could the game be keeping from us? Maybe that's been Final Fantasy VIII's biggest secret after all, the fact that we've never truly understood the game in the first place.